I'm going to introduce Jenn Fair. Jenn is somebody who works over at the USGS. We have been working hand in hand with USGS for like 7 or 8, 9 years now, and it's been a great partnership for everybody involved. I know that they really find our volunteers helpful in the field. We find their expertise incredibly helpful. So it's great to have Jenn, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Jenn.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for having me. So if you'll let me, I'm going to do a little bit longer bio than I usually would because I know I'm a new face in the crowd, and just to kind of emphasize how important it is for us to collaborate and how lucky we are to have such a strong TU chapter here to work with us. Like, I've genuinely been looking forward to this because it's a good way to kind of like reset as to like what we all share and that we care about these resources. So thank you for having me. And also shout out to Mike Hayden, my coworker. Mikey, don't be shy. Correct me when I say the wrong thing, please. But so just so you guys know, my background, I grew up outside of Boston. I have an undergrad degree in environmental engineering. After that, I moved out west and did a lot of mountain biking, skiing, and groundwater remediation work before coming back for grad school at the School of the Environment down at Yale. And there I really focused on rivers and river restoration. So that's where I first ran into Chris Van Yerselen, actually. We were there together at the same time. And I made a class with Jim McBroom, who maybe you guys have run into, Mylona McBroom. It's a pretty niche, but very well-respected consulting firm down in Connecticut. They work all over New England on kind of any kind of river restoration and dam removal work.
He's retired now.
He is retired, but doing well. And he just kind of, I already loved being around rivers and water, but his like fascination and like passion for the resource just kind of like caught me, and I've been stuck in rivers ever since. So I took his class, and then I TA'd for him, and then when I graduated from my master's in 2008 into a recession, he said, hey, I've got a couple projects. Why don't you come on over to Mylona McBroom? So I started at Mylona McBroom in the fall of 2010, and you guys will remember that Hurricane Irene hit in Labor Day of 2011. And we had a contract to do all river restoration work for the New York City DEP, which is the water utility that manages all the Catskills for the water quality protection for the New York City drinking water supply. So Hurricane Irene hit. I jumped in a pickup truck and basically lived in a pickup truck because you'll remember Governor Cuomo at the time just waived all environmental permits. He just said, do whatever you need to do so that people can drive on these roads again. And excavators went straight into all the creeks. So we showed up and we just knock on the excavator door and say, hey, can you just not pave the river? You know, just here's a couple of things that we can do to try to kind of maintain heterogeneity and think about kind of geomorphic processes in rivers. So I did that for a couple of years. And while consulting is great because you get to be kind of at the tip of the spear doing exciting parts of the project, for me, I wanted to understand the larger decision process about why we invest money and why we invest resources in this particular place at this particular time. So I was driven to kind of a bigger picture and decided to go back and get my PhD at the School of the Environment. So I did that and ended up focusing a lot on nutrient and carbon cycling. So I worked in the whole Connecticut River on synoptic sample and water and multi-parameter kind of water quality monitoring. And we were really focused on how carbon is mobilized from terrestrial sources. So dissolved organic carbon, why our streams are brown and becoming browner, how those pump carbon and when they pump carbon into the larger system. So that's really about like the metabolism of a river. So it's a background in hydrology as the main driver, but also really water quality is a touchstone there. So when I graduated from my PhD, my first daughter was born, and I was lucky enough to get a job at the USGS in the New England Water Science Center doing hydraulic modeling stuff. So pretty quantitative hydrology. And then after about a year of that, I saw an ad for a postdoc with Ben Letcher doing the intersection of hydrology and stream temperature for understanding brook trout population dynamics. And I thought, there's no way they're going to even consider me, but I've got the hydrology and the stream temperature part of this down. So I'll put in an application, and I got really super lucky. So I started in December of 2020 at Conti with Ben Letcher and Matt and Todd, folks you know, and Mike. And I've been there ever since.
After probationary period?
Yeah. Yes. So I am. And now I supervise a team of it's an interdisciplinary team of biologists, ecologists, hydrologists who kind of think about the intersection of the physical environment and the brook trout population dynamics. So thank you for coming on that journey with me. The reason I wanted to take a little bit more time than I typically would is just because I don't have a fish biology background. The knowledge in this room of what's happening with the trout populations in the Deerfield is way more than I would even pretend to understand. But what I do have is a really good sense of the physical environment and kind of the leading edge of the research and development around how we talk about stream temperature, stream flow, water quality, and really kind of the new tools we have in order to understand those on the ground and support kind of decision making at the state and federal level. So I say this because it makes, I think, this partnership even more important, because I know that I have just maybe more to learn from you than you have to learn from me. So with that in mind, I kind of have everything in a PowerPoint presentation, but I wanted to keep it informal and ask what part of our program would be most helpful for you guys. So I was thinking, we have this new Flow Photo Explorer tool. Which is basically, we use low-cost game cameras to take time series image data of streams. And then we do annotation of a subset of those images. So like take a pair of images and say more flow, less flow, more flow, less flow. And then we use those to train a deep learning model, an AI model, to then predict stream flow from image data. It's pretty powerful in terms of changing the game as to how we can understand something about stream flow dynamics where we wouldn't otherwise. And I think it's going to change our understanding of kind of rapid assessment of available habitat, especially in small streams. So I was thinking I could demo that, show you what we're doing with that, take any questions or go wherever it's helpful for you guys as like kind of understanding if this could be a helpful tool for anything you're interested in. And then depending on time, because I could probably go on for a really long time, I also have a bunch of plots from Matt O'Donnell and Josie Pilchek of the thermal tagging work that we've been doing over the past few summers. But those are hot off the presses. We've been scrambling over the past few days to kind of get those ready to share with you guys. So that's very new that I'd be happy to share. So let me know, or we can do it the other way around, whatever is exciting. You guys,
What was a Photo Explorer?
you want to do a Photo Explorer?
Yeah.
Is that okay? All right. So, and again, credit to our team at Conti for everything I'm gonna share. Like, we really work together on all the different parts of this. So that's Ben Letcher, Josie, who's at UMass, Matt O'Donnell, you all know, Tim Lambert, who's a postdoc that we have now, who's going to be with us for a few years. He's kind of a very mathy, modelly guy, but also an angler. So great to have around. Todd Dubriel, Mikey, of course. And then for Flow Photo Explorer, we partner with Microsoft's AI for Good Lab. So we have a computer scientist there named Amrita who helps us think about all these AI related questions. And then Jeff Walker, who's our software developer, who helps us kind of stand up all these applications. And Philip Goodling, who's a hydrologist down in the Baltimore area with the USGS. So all those people, lots of credit for everything we're doing here. Anyone I'm forgetting, Mikey? Anything?
Yeah, I can't really think that.
Okay.
Like FPE met. What about the ox too? That'd be fun.
Which one?
The ox, like how it was identifying the birds.
Oh yeah, the common MERS. Okay. Yeah. All right. So let me folks online, can you see the PowerPoint presentation?
Yeah, so I think maybe you want to start like a slideshow or whatever.
Okay. Wait,
Yeah.
so,
Is
so
that-
this is
There
the,
you go.
this is the website.
Oh,
Is that okay?
cool. Yeah.
Can you see that online and everything?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Alright.
Maybe you could minimize the, are you able to get the, there you go.
Yeah. All right.
Bye, Bill. Bye. Yeah.
Sorry, Bill. Sorry, Bill. Okay, so this is the landing page for Flow Photo Explorer. There's a lot of background info here, including some really short videos kind of explaining the genesis of the project and how we came to this kind of new tool. If you Google Flow Photo Explorer, it'll pop up, usually the first hit. Start exploring, and it's going to load our interactive tool. So what it's showing in the map on the left are all of the cameras that we have out around the country. So I think we have 289 users and 360 sites now across the US. And a lot of them are Trout Unlimited, actually. We were super thankful around towards the end of January. TU National made a big social media push showing time-lapse images from FP. You unmute.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Should be good. Yeah, I'm muted.
Oh,
No, I think it should be good.
Okay, sorry about that. And so you can search the database easily by affiliation, station names. So let's see.
Choose the Westbrook. Right,
Okay.
that's the project.
Yeah, I would go in that direction. So we started putting cameras in the Westbrook in like 2021. So this is our longest data set, and we actually just submitted a paper to test, which is our first shot at evaluating the deep learning model performance for predicting flow. So you can search by all kinds of things here, but I'll choose Westbrook 0, which is the one where we had a real-time gauge until the turn of this calendar year.
While it's loading, I poked around on the website the other day. The hard part was, unless you really know where Westbrook is, I don't know if it said anything about physically where it is. Like, for example,
It's on my-
Westbrook is
it's
in
on my
West
property.
Brookfield. What's that?
Okay, so yeah, so if you zoom in on the map, it'll show you on all kinds of typical Google backgrounds, and then in the metadata, it'll give you coordinates lat long, but you're saying like it doesn't say that it's in Whately, basically. That would
Yeah, so for example, I think Westbrook is in West Brookfield. So when I try and do a Westbrook,
No, it's in West Whately.
no, there was a separate one for West Whately.
Oh, okay.
You're saying Westbrook is in Whately as well?
Yes.
Who's on first?
All right, now I'm thoroughly confused.
So the Westbrook,
Talk to Mike.
the Westbrook that I'm sharing right now is in Whately. So what you see immediately is the metadata for the site and an image. The magic here is that I can zoom out. What you can do is trace the hydrograph. So on this hydrograph, oh my God, you have the option to show model predictions for different model runs, but we also have, we co-located this camera with a USGS real-time gauge that we deployed partially for this purpose. And you can scroll over the hydrograph and see what the river looks like at different stages of a hydrograph. This by itself has been pretty powerful. So we made the ability to make short videos. So if you have a big system come through, you can see the rise and fall of the river and how much it changes in these small streams. It's so dynamic. It makes it really hard to measure with typical methods. So this is a really cool new no contact, non-contact way to do it. But it tells a lot of the story with just the tracing of the hydrograph in the pictures. We enabled people to look at it as a distribution too, so you can automatically see at this site what it looks like at really low flows and what it looks like at really high flows. And then this one has multiple years of images. So what we did was we have a tab on the landing page that is an annotation interface. And basically what it is, we made it a game. So it randomly pulls pairs of images from the image database for that site, and it asks the user to say, is this more flow or less flow? Or about the same, or is there something wrong with the pictures that you can't tell? And we ask people to do 1,000 annotations per site, which for scale, if you stay focused, takes like 2 to 3 hours. It's not a big deal. And actually it can be kind of fun. Like you get a little sucked into the game of it all. And then we use that to train the deep learning model. And what the model does is learn about how to evaluate the relative amount of stream flow in an image, and it ranks all of the images. So what you end up with is a percentile of flow captured in each image. So rather than a typical hydrograph where you have the absolute flow, you instead have a percentile. So what it looks like, and I can show you here, we have multiple models run for this site, but I'll go for the most recent, is pretty good. So here the blue is the observed hydrograph at the reference gauge, and the orange is the deep learning model predicted relative flow. And this is only using the images and human annotations of the subset of the pairs of the images. And you can look at it as a distribution. So here we can see when the blue dot and the orange dot track each other, it means that they're doing pretty well. And then we can look at it as a scatter plot. So if it was a perfect fit, these would all line up on a one-to-one line from corner to corner. And you can see at low flows, this does remarkably well.
Yeah.
But sometimes at these medium to high flows, there's some problems. So we're in the process of trying to figure out what these are. Most of them are related to glare in the images. So we're investigating ways to pre-process and filter images with a lot of glare. But overall, I mean, if you apply rank-based model fit statistics, we use the Kendall-Tau statistics where 0 is horrible and 1 is perfect. Our average is about 0.75, which is really good. Like if I got that in a process-based rainfall runoff model, that would be a paper. So it's very good model performance in most
So
cases.
some simple, your square values wrong there.
Yes, yeah,
I mean,
R
it's really-
square is another very good way.
Simple,
Yeah.
not the other one, simple R square is pretty strong there. I mean,
Yeah,
there's a line there that doesn't do real well in the middle, but it does real strong in the two ends.
right. And interestingly, this tends to do really well at low flow, which is where we have the hardest time gauging streams, because it's the hardest time to take a good flow measurement. So what happens is in our reference gauges, the rating curves tend to be pretty poor at really low flow.
That's where you take the bottom third of that data and you publish it, and you forget about the top part.
Jen, what does 100% represent on the y-axis?
I'm sorry, I missed that question.
What does 100% represent on the y-axis?
That is the image in the image record that has the most flow.
So, but what I'm getting at is, how do I determine what 100% is? Is it 3 feet? Is it 12 inches? Is it, what is the max number you can get?
Yeah, so with this tool, with the way we're doing it, we can't get there yet. What we get right now is a hydrograph that is really good at telling you extreme conditions. So duration of flow, big flow events, and even drying and droughts, and then the relative magnitude of those events. It
Okay,
does
so for
absolute flow to be extra clear.
okay, so if we all of a sudden had a huge storm that we had never seen before, right, that would move the 100% up, if you will, or the data point somewhere along there would skew the data a little higher now.
So the whole scale would adjust on the y-axis
Okay,
as you
perfect.
now have a new maximum. But the
Gotcha.
model is trained to recognize that. So we don't have
Yep.
to retrain. We just have to rerun the model for new images and get a prediction from the model for that image.
No, understood. It just, if you have that one event that skews everything, right, it'll just auto adjust.
Yeah, so it's more robust than rating curve approaches for that reason, because you don't
Okay.
have to remodel. Your model is already trained for that site. You just have to rerun the model.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, thanks for the question. Keep them coming. I'd rather you just ask the questions so I answer your questions as they come up.
So, Jen, can I just ask you, in this particular example on Westbrook, there is a gauge, right? That, so you know what the volume of water is coming through.
Yeah, yep. So we can evaluate how well the model is doing.
Right.
And I'll switch to the PowerPoint presentation. I can give you a couple visuals of how this looks across just the Westbrook sites, for example. So we use that as our test bed and have written a whole paper on how the model performs and what leads to better versus worse model, what controls model performance. Yeah, I can get there. But I wanted you guys to kind of be able to see this interface. And again, like, the power here is, at first we were like, nobody's gonna really want this. Like, you need to know exactly how much water is in the river. And it turns out, sure, you need that if you're calculating loading calculations. But if you're trying to understand how much headwater stream habitat is available during a low flow period, this gets you where you need to go in a lot of cases, because it can tell you when it's dry and when it's patchy and when it's fully wet and
I was
connected.
gonna ask you what the practical applications of.
Yeah, so I'm gonna jump. There's a lot of different things we could dig into here, and we're always looking for feedback. So if you go home and you're clicking around this and there's something that you're like, I really wish it did this, please email me, because we're trying to make it work. Like, the point here is that this is unlike the USGS NWIS, where only USGS can put the data in. This, we've allowed anyone to be able to load images and have access to the model. And so we want to make sure that it's working for the people who are putting in cameras and picking this up and using the data. So tell us if something's not making sense. Like, we want to make it work for everyone who wants to use it.
Jen, is there a process for that data that comes in being vetted?
So we have an off-the-shelf personally identifying information filter, a PII detector. It's called Mega Detector, that we run automatically over the image data sets to make sure we're not sharing pictures of people and vehicles. It also flags animals, which is really fun. But for personal safety and like PII privacy reasons, we had to make sure we weren't showing pictures of people and vehicles.
Mike showed us the picture of the owls.
Yeah,
That was
Yeah.
pretty cool.
Randy,
yeah,
So Bill doesn't have to worry about hiking in the nude around his property.
yes.
Randy, remember that photo of the owl I sent you
Yeah.
on the tree? That was from the mega detector.
Yeah,
It found
No,
it. Yeah.
I asked that because there's plan apps like iNaturalist and
yeah,
Ed Maps and stuff. And if for natural heritage to use them,
yeah,
they have to vet them because
yeah,
quality control, because if they're looking at something, they gotta make sure that it is.
yeah,
And they've got to a point where they're like, people just sending in pictures,
yeah,
it's more work to sort out what's decent.
right, I know.
But there's a way that you have quality control on other people's data coming in to make sure that.
Yeah, so we're protecting it for privacy right now. We're not doing any species detection with this, although we've thought about it. We're very tempted. So we haven't gone that route yet, but if we were to do that, we'd have to think really hard about how we would host that, basically, because we would then be responsible for the image collection. The way we've done this, we're just trying to empower anyone who wants to do this to have access to this database. But I hear what you're saying. And let me put a pin in that idea and come back to it with one of the examples. Because as Mike said, we have one where we're starting to use it to predict the relative amount of birds in images. So you guys are, I love these questions. Thank you. Can I get there? Is that okay?
You just go ahead and geek out. And,
Okay, all right.
It's good to see someone excited about what they do.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
this stuff is awesome. This is
That's your middle name. I'm excited about what I do.
yeah, yeah, probably bit of a dork. So let's see, what are other things? So, continuing on that thread of like what is the value of relative flow data, I want to show you guys a site. This is a site that one of my team measures and manages down in Shenandoah National Park. And similar to the Westbrook, we do a lot of kind of test bed science around cold water refugia down there, especially for brook trout. So this is a site where we're not co-located with a gauge. We just have images, and then we annotated in order to train the deep learning model, ran the model, and we have a predicted hydrograph, which you can see in blue. What's crazy about this is that, so we went in the annotations, we enabled people to tell us when the flow in the river is connected, disconnected, so isolated pools, and dry. And then we use that to understand where in this distribution you would have a threshold. And what's crazy is that if you look at this distribution, what we have here is basically the shape of a flow duration curve and the exceedance curve. And you can see where there are shifts in the distribution, you move from connected to disconnected, isolated pools, then down to totally dry. So we're able to use this to establish thresholds. And now we can tell the amount of time in the record that this particular stream has isolated pools versus totally dry, which is the game changer. We had no idea what was happening in this particularly high value cold water headwater stream. And now we know that even in typical low flow conditions, it's disconnected and drying. And that enables the park to change how they understand fishing regulations and access to this stream. So it really changes how we can understand like available habitat in the headwaters of our, what's remaining of our cold water refugia. So let's see, Mikey, is there anything else I should cover in the interface right now, or should I do the use cases?
Just the use cases.
Okay, so let me, so this is just a slide that shows us how much this tool has been growing, which is kind of, is that working? Oh yeah, okay. So the chart on the left shows the kind of the exponential growth of the tool. So at this point, we have 255 users, 389 solutions, over 8 million pictures. And we've run 64 models. We run them in batches whenever we have enough data at any station. So this week, we're gonna run another 25 models. It's the imagery, it's stored in our database, doubles every about 300 days, so about every year. So it's quickly growing. It's almost a full-time job to keep up with it. Our users come from everywhere. So Trout Unlimited, you can see on the bottom as one of our biggest partners, but we actually have a lot of USGS internal science centers that are using it, which is pretty cool because they have cooperators like us who don't need a full-blown reference gauge that costs, $60,000 a year to run, and they're expensive and they're important for their own applications and their own reasons. This instead can complement those programs and support program at other USGS science centers, which
It costs $60,000 a year.
that's roughly, but it's
So like,
for a super gauge on a big river, it's
All personnel time.
it is.
Yeah, USGS really QAQCs their data. It's insane.
Cost varies by location and river and difficulty of making measurements and correcting the data. So, West Whately on the Westbrook doesn't cost $60,000 a year, but if you were to put in a new gauge on the Connecticut River, probably
So-
about that.
Are USGS gauging stations at risk of being doged?
I can't really comment.
comfortably, you use that as a verb.
It's heartbreaking.
So do you know what, like just a general ballpark figure for setting up a gauge? Like if you set up a USGS gauge on a river that was the size of Deerfield?
I don't want to guess on that.
Okay.
I explored that with Matt O'Donnell.
Yeah,
We were told it was about $25,000. And right now, USGS is no longer providing funding for most of them. They get other people, other users, other parties to pay for it. For example, when the Cold Rivers washed out during Irene, it was replaced, but it's paid for by Massachusetts DCR.
It'd be nice to have one at Diamond Drill so we could tell how accurate Fife is.
Yeah, we talked about that. We have talking about,
We know they lie, we just want to know how bad they lie.
Could an FP camera do that? So, or, yeah,
probably not with the absolute flow.
Yeah, not absolute.
It's not the right application for FP.
Unless
So
you
it's just too much
calibrated
water.
it somehow.
Yeah, so we have talked a lot. So I put in some funding recently to try to transform from relative to absolute flow. So I shared those distributions, right? Where you have the ranks. That's a flow duration curve. Like that's an exceedance probability curve. And the hardest part is getting the shape of that curve right. So we already have the shape of the curve. And if we have discrete flow measurements spread across that curve, we should be able to transform into absolute flow.
Right.
We just need enough data in enough places to convince ourselves that it's accurate enough. I think we'd run into problems at the tails because it's so hard to have absolute flow measurements at those extreme flows, right? So at a lot of these sites, like at the size of the Deerfield, we can't weight it at the sites at the highest flows that.
Only
Yeah.
for a half a second.
Right,
it goes off the scale.
Yeah.
right.
The gauge isn't working anymore, right? Is that-
Right. So yeah, so we've thought a lot about how to do it and I would love to get there, but I think in the meantime, for the unlocking like the value of this low cost imagery, this kind of relative flow hydrograph can get us more than we initially thought, or at least that's what we're finding with partners.
We always want to get at the numbers. So on, in the, I know Todd was doing like transects on the streams that were in the Quabbin when I was out there,
Yeah.
trying to do telemetry out. And so if you get a transfer, if you get multiple transects, like maybe a few, and you're able to then, calculate the actual flow for that particular moment in time,
Yeah,
is that, you can insert that into your, relative graph and actually have that translated into,
CFS.
yeah, yeah. So I'm gonna,
Theoretically, you could do.
yeah, so I'm gonna go back to Westbrook. Yeah, this is exactly what we're thinking about. This is more like a next steps than it is something we're not gonna do. But for example, if you look at, so here we're back at Westbrook lower, or Westbrook 0. So here the blue is the reference gauge and the orange is the AI predicted model. So this is the distribution I'm talking about. So you can imagine, this is the hard part, getting the shape of this curve. So if we know that at this point, Mikey goes out and he takes a flow measurement at this point, then we know at that point, we can translate between the relative and absolute flow. But the question is, what's the sensitivity of that transform to the number of absolute discharge measurements you have? So you would have to have a full range of flow measurements over the full range of observed.
full range.
I don't think, but that's the sensitivity analysis, right?
Yeah.
I don't know what the density of those observed flow measurements would be in order to do a reliable transform. And we have the data in the Westbrook to do that sensitivity analysis. Mikey's been doing those flow measurements now for 5 years. So we'll get there. It's just we haven't gotten there yet. So many hours of the day.
So just to make sure I understand,
Yeah,
the blue line in that is a gauge?
he's a gauge. Yeah, it's right on Haydenville Road.
You're doing a transect or what?
No, that is a stream gauge.
That's an actual-
Mikey does transects here in order to do the rating curve at this gauge.
Yeah.
So we manage this gauge
Right.
for absolute flow, but we also have a camera co-located so we can
Okay.
test the performance of the deep learning model. Yeah. So we do this at Westbrook at Haydenville Road, and then we also do it at many places up the Westbrook, and then at Tribs to the reservoir. So including Avery Brook and West Whately Brook, all of those trips to the Northampton water supply.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we do it, I can show you a few plots, but we have them co-located at USGS gauges around the country because people have found them useful to have. So we can do it with a bunch of different data, with a bunch of different types of hydrographs.
I have one, you know, North River.
Yeah, you're our early adopter. Yeah. Yeah. So thanks. Yeah, you guys are finding our Achilles heels early and often. Appreciate it. So this, let's see. Right. This just shows this is a quick video that shows how the annotation interface work. So that's what it looks like. You can use keystrokes to just choose which image has more flow. And then the buttons along the bottom, you can select to identify additional labels. So things like disconnected pools, dry, partial ice, and snow cover, full snow cover, or a bad image. And it's pretty fun and easy. One thing we found is that accuracy of the annotations is really important for model performance. Not surprising. If you're training the model, you need the annotations to be pretty good. And annotations are easier to do when you capture more variability in a system. So a system where it just doesn't, either the time increments don't capture the flashiness of the stream, or the stage or total volume just doesn't change that much, are harder to annotate and therefore harder to model. I'm not gonna go, but this is kind of a big picture of 19 models that are co-located with gauges. So this is that scatter plot where if it was on the red line, it would be a perfect fit. But this gives you an idea of some variability between sites. So like the bottom middle, the Mount Hope River down in Connecticut, you know, we have image quality issues. It's pointing south, and so we just get a ton of glare.
Yeah.
And that's what the scatter is around the middle. And then we're trying to sort out what causes some of this scatter in a lot of these other sites. So things that we've been able to test is when annotations are easier, and that's when we have more variable stream flow. So that's the top left. We had created kind of a categorical evaluation of camera stability. And we thought this would be a silver bullet. We thought that places where we had co-located cameras where one moved more than the other, that would mean that the model wouldn't work as well, but that's actually not true. So you can see kind of on the plot on the right, it kind of looks like, you know, I don't know, that doesn't look like a pattern to me, and it turns out the stats don't really show a pattern. So this amazingly seems to be pretty robust to like movements of the camera. We have found if it rotates, the model can get thrown off. But like one of our cameras is on a snowmobile bridge, so it goes like this, and then over time it like shakes. And that one, that's the AVR, AVB. So all of these co-located sites with the open circles, and they all do relatively well and about the same. We know the model does better when the annotations are better, not surprisingly, but it doesn't appear that the camera stability really drives model performance. So that's also good, because it means typically with these small streams, we would go out there, we would have to drive a staff gauge into the stream. Who knows how that long is that? If you're gonna even get it stable, who knows how long it's gonna last? It just isn't reliable in these small dynamic systems, as you guys all know. And then you're running out there and taking these transect flow measurements whenever you possibly can. And as you know, you have to be out there before it stops raining to even catch the peak of the event. So these small streams are just impossible to gauge with the typical stage discharge relationship. And instead, this is saying if we get a $500 camera, and that's the one that we have to buy, other people could buy one less expensive, and put it out there, even if it's shaking a little bit, can still do a pretty good job, which is exciting. Common image issues, and we're just starting to look into some off-the-shelf models for improving some of the quality of these images. So haze and fog, the model struggles with. Glare, the model struggles with. Some of these are engineer problems, like if people don't predict vegetation growth. So you go out there this time of year and you put your camera out and you come back in June and you can't even see the creek anymore. And then we've been now telling people just to try to point the cameras northish when they can, because that helps reduce the glare. But we're just like slowly starting to figure out if we need to pre-process the images or if we could use the annotation interface to teach the model when it's dealing with a bad image. So you can imagine if, in addition to more flow, less flow, more flow, less flow, we also say that one has glare, that one doesn't. These both have glare.
Yeah.
Then could you teach the model to say, ooh, that's a bad picture. I'm not going to really put much weight on it while I'm doing this prediction. So that's kind of the state of our platform. The thing that's come out of the woodwork on this that has been crazy is kind of, we were myopically focused on streamflow because in all of our kind of cold water refugia program, we know that's a missing data source. We know that we're never going to have be able to measure streamflow at the kind of spatial and temporal extent we need in order to kind of answer the state's questions about where we have cold water refugia and small streams. So we were like, okay, let's figure out a low cost way to at least get something where we don't have anything. But then slowly people kind of started coming to us and saying, hey, this image ranking model, do we have to use it for streamflow? And it turns out that as long as a person can see the difference in the quantity of something between two images, we can rank the images for that amount. So we had partners come out of the, and I showed you this one, of the Upper Midwest Water Science Center, where they're doing harmful algal bloom studies. And they're really concerned about how they kind of move upstream and downstream in this particular canal. So they already had an image data set and they annotated it. Instead of amount of stream flow, they just said more green, less green, more green, less green. We ran the model and it did really well. So now they're putting out real-time collecting chlorophyll data and putting out real-time cameras so that we can run a HABS model on this platform in real time. So the video on the right is kind of showing you the model predictions at the really low end. You can see it's pretty clear. And at the high end, there's a lot of green. So like the plot, I'm showing the call outs for the images at really high predicted blooms versus really low predicted bloom times. And then here it kind of shows you the threshold. So you can imagine that shift in the sedence curve kind of tells you where you go from impactful bloom to clear water. And you can track that across the hydrograph and say, okay, at this particular site, this many days last year, we had harmful algal blooms, which if you're the state DEP and you're trying to figure out how often you tend to have to close a body of water for recreational uses, any reason, water supply reasons, now you can have something, a baseline to work off of. And you can do it all remotely rather than having a person there grabbing samples and running analytical fees. So, and then the other one that's come up is snow. And this is some folks out in Colorado. This is a snow tell site in the Gunnison, and they happen to have imagery from aimed at their snow depth gauge. And we, instead of annotating on amount of HABs or amount of flow, we annotated on amount of snow. And the model, again, did really well. And then, so this is the last one. This one came up. We were doing a presentation to the National Innovation Center, and some of our colleagues from the USGS Alaska Water Science Center, who are really interested in common MERS on an island off Alaska, got in touch with us, and they had 8 million images taken every 30 seconds of these common MERS on this island. And the deal is that the MERS are ground nesting. And what happens is the eagles come over trying to eat the MERS and scare them away from their eggs sitting on the rocks. And then gulls come in and eat the eggs. And that ruins their young of year recruitment for the population of the MERS. And so they had interns going through and counting the amount of birds in each image. And they said, wait a minute, what if we just annotated on relative amount of birds and ran the model? And you can see that the model does really well, showing when there's all of the MERS are sitting there, and some of these you can even see the gulls come in. So give it a few seconds and you'll see them all scatter at the drop. See, there's a gull waiting. And then look at this. An eagle flies overhead and boom, gone. And then there the gulls come in. See the gulls come in and they're just eating the eggs. So this is crazy because you can imagine that we could train these images for both amount of gulls and amount of murres. And so then you have the population dynamics of the gulls versus the murres on this island off of Alaska with a $500 game camera, which is pretty crazy. So we're really, obviously, really fired up about this. And this gets back to the question about kind of species detection. So can we trust anyone's judgment of what kind of bird this is? I don't know yet. We haven't gotten there. But that's a new application that we're really excited about.
And even Ben thought they were penguins initially.
We called them penguins for a while, and then over the holidays, simultaneously, Ben's family and my family both pointed out that there are not penguins in the Northern Hemisphere and that we're a bunch of idiots. And so we had to do a bunch of Googling, lost a ton of bets, and now we just call them seabirds. So it's an example of when.
You ever see the polar bear?
Yeah.
The friends, the penguin and their best friends, and they help each other out and from other sides of the globe. Yeah,
I do think that there's a side hustle in voiceovers of some of these videos. I feel like you can make some pretty engaging stuff. But anyway, so that's where we are on the use cases. And I think next steps are real-time image delivery. So we have a pipeline going. We know we can do it with cell-enabled cameras. And I've written a lot of proposals over the past few months to try to get that kind of programmatic funding to support real-time, because our costs go up a lot when we're bringing in data and have to rerun models, often based on new data. So real-time imagery, we think that the future is to kind of go to an image ranking platform, kind of rebrand a little bit instead of just Flow, and think about images together and like using one image record to get multiple predicted models. So you could imagine an image of a stream, you could use it for ice in, ice out. You could use it for habitat availability. You could use it for stream flow. You could use it for phenology. Like there's a bunch of different things that an image captures. It's an integrated view of the landscape. So we'll probably go, we'll try if I can get some a decent funding chunk for the next step to kind of rebrand and go a little bit more generic. What else? Multiple species, real time. And then the pre-processing for images, kind of trying to train the model to automatically filter out bad images. And that will help. We think that will really help our performance a lot. So that's what I have on FPE. Any questions about that?
Jim, do you have a question about setting up a gauge thing?
I was thinking about one below, like 91 Bridge in Jersey. Was almost thinking you could point it at one of the support columns in the river, go out there in the kayak, point a couple dots, a different color dot on the support to say, all right.
Yeah.
And we can kind of figure out something like that.
Yeah.
Because there's something that's going to be permanent.
Yeah.
And nothing's going to move, hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, we have some super users down at the New Jersey Water Science Center that are doing a similar thing. And because they're doing it themselves, these hydrotechs, they found putting in spray painted rebar like on the bank just as a stable visual reference for the annotation really helps.
I get a problem.
Yeah.
So where I figure, okay,
Yeah.
move.
So in that particular spot, I kind of wonder if you would still be okay just looking downstream from the bridge, because there's so much floodplain activation that happens even at bank full and above bank full, that you might have enough stable visual reference with like the pretty well-aged, or yeah, there's some good sized trees on that right descending bank, like some good sycamores, and you might be able to use that to annotate and it would do okay. We find like, because you're not concerned about the geomorphic shift in the cross section, you're just concerned about being able to tell the difference in two images. it actually doesn't matter if the cross section shifts. As long as you as a person can reliably say there's more flow here and less flow here, which is like a totally different way of thinking about gauging a stream. But it might be worth a try to annotate, collect data for the summer and try annotating. Just looking downstream from the bridge and see what we could get from it. We have some cameras that are just aimed at the bank. So they just show like the rising and fall. You can't even see the whole river. And those models still do pretty well. So as long it's like a crazy change of how you think about this, but as long as a person can see the difference, it seems to do okay.
But that's more accurate to know, okay?
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, but then you got to get out there. Yeah. We could try it. We could try both. Yeah. Yeah.
DOT permit.
Yeah, it's gonna,
No, no.
Yeah.
There you go.
they're easy enough to get.
Yeah. Oh, really? DOT. Also,
For a
it's
camera, yeah.
yeah.
I like dealing with the railroad, trust me.
But you would put the camera on the bank somewhere, right?
Right.
Just point it out.
That's what I.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're just painting some.
A couple of
You're doing some.
dots,
You're
a black,
tagging,
a
you're
red,
graffiti
a
or-
green. Just
Yeah.
so you
for
know,
stage.
you know,
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
you know,
Yeah.
4 or 5 dots is probably all you need.
Absolutely. Yeah. That would do it. Yeah. That would be really cool.
Be an interesting one to look at.
Yeah.
So Jenna, I have a problem with glare and, just only occasionally, but it's
Yeah.
in a southern direction that.
Yeah.
So, if I move the camera, is that gonna like just disrupt the whole process on that site?
Yes. If you move it enough that it's a different,
I mean, I
really
took-
different view.
Fix it upstream would be a whole different.
Yeah, I think hang tight, and we can use that site to try to remove the glare. Because there are off-the-shelf models that you can literally remove the glare from an image.
Oh, yeah.
Like you can, same thing for like haze, you can like sharpen an image with some of these models. So let us try that. And that's a good reminder that your site, I remember looking at your site and it does have some very infrequently, but like extreme glare.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
one of the 70 or something like that is probably. It's
Right.
not real off.
Yeah. Well, so let us try it that way first before you move the camera. Yeah.
Suppose you had like 2 glary pictures in a row.
Yeah.
Can you just use like, we count on image 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 suck,
Yeah.
6, 7, 8, and just like draw a line through those.
That's what that's
So,
the
you know,
dream. Yeah.
You lose data, but if there's that trend and you assume they're on that line, the assumption's made they're on that line.
Right.
It didn't just dry up.
Yeah.
and
Right.
come back.
Right. Yeah. I think so. What happens right now is if when you're annotating, you come up and you flag an image as bad, we take it out of the model training set. So the model doesn't learn that as anything valuable, right? And then we basically interpolate,
If your one was 4,
Yeah.
and you missed the data point, the next one was
Yeah.
6, you average them together and throw a 5 in
Yeah.
there. and call it fine.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which-
Yeah.
I mean, that's fair. Statisticians would lose their mind over that,
Yeah.
but
A lot of them I work with. Yeah, but you're totally right. But I think what we can try first is ways to remove the glare from the image and see if the model can get what it needs out of the images. And some combination of those 2 things is where we're probably gonna land. If we can't salvage them, we'll toss them and we won't have a prediction for that time and we'll interpolate over it. And if we can save them, we'll try to use them, I think. Is the dream.
So I have one more question for you, Jim, before we get off of this.
Yeah.
Is, when you do identify a picture as like, say, partial ice, right? Partial ice and snow, then the model is just weighting that it's a weighting judgment on that picture. It's not like discarding that picture.
We save the picture in the database always. It's just paying less attention to that picture.
Paying less.
Weighting is really the right word. It just uses the information for that from that image less in making its predictions.
Yeah.
And one thing we've been messing with, and this is where we just finished, we have an EPA ROAR grant that comes from ORD that they funded us to experiment with if we train like a global model. So imagine that we take all of the images from the Westbrook and we use that to train the model, all the images and all the annotations. And we use that as a global model for like what happens to stream flow and images.
Yeah.
And then you kind of refine with additionally with the images from a given site, how does it do? And it does a little bit better. But because you have this giant image data set, it kind of compounds your image quality issues. So like, got to figure out how to extract what we can from those bad images. And then that might mean that we can compensate for the issues at a site scale with a larger global model. So we're just finishing that report, and hopefully we'll see if I don't know how in the interface we're going to quite make that work, but we're trying to figure out the best modeling approach, basically. Yeah.